Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. Happy New Year. This is Aragon Live, our weekly video podcast. With me, I've got Ken Delaney, Betsy Burton, Adam Pease. Welcome back, everybody. Hope it was a great holiday. We're here to dive right into tech, and we're going to jump right in with the NVIDIA keynotes. So there's a bunch of things that NVIDIA is pushing. They're really pushing the envelope around their GPUs. Focusing on the open source, the run AI, but the big things I would say on NVIDIA, and then the team can chime in, doubling down on gaming with their GPUs, focusing on robotics. In the pre-call, we kind of talked about them trying to counter Elon Musk's AI company. And then the big thing is desktop GPUs. They announced a $3,000 desktop device. It kind of looks like a Mac Mini. You can plug two of them together. $3,000 price point. You can process a very good sized LLM, and that means that cloud is not the only option for LLMs, and that's what the big guys are trying to convince you of. Is you had to run big LLMs in the cloud because you didn't have enough compute. So I think this is pretty. I mean, I think that the desktop device, there's a lot of noise around that. But I think that may force and drive a bunch of innovation from the people that sell servers, because they're going to have to counter this. So welcome to the team for discussion.
Yeah, you can't get the computer right away. It's still some months off.
Yeah. But so anyway, I think the thing is notice that in a lot of our Aragon lives over the last 24 months, we talk about NVIDIA and the NVIDIA keynote. There's no Intel keynote. There's no Intel keynote. So NVIDIA has become the darling. And again, this gets at business models of, designing and making your chips like Intel, or designing your chips and having somebody else like Taiwan Semiconductor make them. But again, we've had a changing of the guard.
Yep.
And the big discussion you're going to hear a lot from us this year is on GPU-based database architectures, not CPU-based database architectures.
And one small note to go with that, in that computer, MediaTek is also a Taiwanese company, is also participating in the development of that computer.
Yeah. He was also emphasizing the idea that AI is moving into the physical world. Did you get any of that, Jim? It sounds like I was reading up some stuff on what he was saying, and it looks like they were really pushing AI in the physical realm and that sort of role. And I thought that was kind of interesting, which makes sense because it's NVIDIA. I mean, they want to push that physical sort of presence for AI.
That's what the robots and the driverless cars efforts were.
Yeah. So it's, we've talked a lot about agentics, but this is a lot about in the physical world as well. So
robotic. So I think when you look at IoT, the evolution of IoT, connected devices, but now we're talking about robotic devices, and really we're talking about automation.
Right. Okay.
A robot can automate things. And again, remember, manufacturing cars, robots have been there for 40 years.
Yeah.
So I think there's, when you actually look at its sector, which is manufacturing, this is not a new thing. And now in distribution, with Amazon distribution centers, they bought a robotics company, 10 years ago, and they've been engineering that robotic stuff to move boxes around in warehouses. But I think when you look at manufacturing and distribution, it's not new. Transportation, that's one of the areas that's going to be new.
Okay.
But when you actually look at the evolution of robotics, not that new.
Right. Yeah, it's been happening for a long time. It's the combination of AI that becomes more interesting.
Well, so the question, I think the thing that I think is interesting is, some of these innovators look at use cases before they make the tech. And I think Elon's the one that figured out that an assistant for older people, a robot that helps older people, which is, by the way, from a movie.
Right.
From a movie. So, but Jensen's just copying him.
Yeah.
Now, I do think, when we talk later about, some of the quantum stuff, that the, higher powered, processors like quantum, I think the idea of simulations in gaming become a much, forward-looking simulations become a much bigger thing. We've already talked about in the pre-call today about the ability to basically use these AI video tools to make, us look like we're talking through a script when it's not us, it's an avatar. That's here. That's absolutely here. Commercial grade, absolutely not. Anybody that watches more than 20 seconds realizes it's not a real person, right? Because their head is like this and they're blinking a lot. Ken, over to you about Apple. What's going on with Vision Pro?
So, earlier when this got announced, I was pretty excited about it because I've watched these devices for quite some time. And I really like the way Apple implemented this. But it was $3,000. And, what I'm going to talk about in the next item about CES, there's a lot of eyeglasses, video eyeglasses that are going to be shown this year in CES. So maybe Apple didn't push the envelope far enough. And they just got, beaten by producing an old style headset with strap and remote battery and all that stuff. But people really want to move to more eyeglasses, and it's probably going to mean that Apple's going to put this on the back burner, and we'll see what they're going to do. They're probably working on eyeglasses. I suspect they'll be a little bit late in that because they always like to mature things. But it sounds like this Vision Pro thing is not going to go anywhere. Then we can move on to CES. So I'll be at CES tomorrow, the next day, and I'll write something about it next
And
week.
before you go on, it doesn't seem like anyone really has this headset eyeglass thing figured out. I mean, what's really been the adoption of the eyeglasses?
Well, they haven't had the battery life to do what people want. It's been a form factor thing. I mean, there's a couple things I probably should say. Eyeglasses are a fashion item. That's a problem. Not everybody wants to wear the black rim eyeglasses.
Right.
There hasn't been enough power to put it all together without a separate battery pack. And then it's just a question of putting all the technology in a small package like that. But, in reading before I leave for CES and reading what I'm going to be seeing, there are a lot of new demonstrations, people getting into this thing. So I think we're at a inflection point where probably these eyeglasses are going to have some significant capability. Certainly you can wear them in industrial applications, and I think that's probably where at least you can get prompts from the server, which doesn't take as much power. Use wireless technology to pick things off the shelf or whatever it might be. So I think there may be some applications in vertical markets where you don't get to choose the fashion style you want to wear. So, we'll see. I'll know more after I visit CES. Okay, so the next item here is CES expectations. And I'll tell you what it appears I'm going to see when I go there. First thing I'll start off with is going to be a lot bigger TVs with a lot better resolution. They're actually going to use AI on these TVs. So you're going to start to see chatbots in the TVs. There's a technology that's been around standard for a while called Matter, M-A-T-T-E-R, which is used for IoT, to get IoT devices accepted by your home quicker without, all the difficulties of setting them up. So that's going to be a maturity thing. We're going to see better home energy management via AI again. We're going to see rings for your finger and glasses, of course. There'll be a lot of health tech. Health tech in terms of self-diagnosis at your home, and then also to help the healthcare professionals. HDMI 2.2 will be coming out, which is going to give higher refresh rates to TVs, better resolutions, really quite a bit of improvement there. Wi-Fi 7 will see a rollout. That's going to give you about 6 gigabits per second performance around your house. You're still limited by what you get from the downlink, but that'll be out there. So those are some of the things that we'll see. I think AI will be an adjective into every booth I stop by, and we'll see what all that means. So I think we'll get to see some real applications of what AI is going to do in the consumer electronics business. So Adam, over to you.
Yeah. So this is a funny little story. Facebook, Meta, basically deployed these AI agent style fake users to Instagram, and I'm not sure if they were on Facebook too, but they planned this and then they started it up a few days ago and basically instantly pulled the fake AI profiles from the platforms because it got so much backlash from users. People were making fun of it, calling it kind of creepy, calling it scary, you know, all sorts of things. Apparently, there are still plans to bring them back, but you know, these were basically end-to-end AI users that were using language models to generate text and diffusion models to generate fake images, and they were meant to be, you know, basically personalities you could chat with. And I think the lesson here is just that consumers really don't like this right now. It's not marketed well to them, and it doesn't seem to be a vocal desire among any consumer base really to interact with more fake users, and yet it's something these companies are pursuing, presumably because they think it will lead to more engagement on the platform. So didn't work out this time, and I guess we'll see if they can do it better next time when they try again, because they've said they will. And the next step here, we've got an update for you on the OpenAI story, which we mentioned a while back about their plans to switch from nonprofit to for-profit. And so they've released a statement at the end of December saying that they want to become a Delaware-based PBC, which is a public benefit corp, which is also the designation that XAI and Anthropic have. And so it is popular amongst the AI companies. And, you know, it's very different from the capped sort of nonprofit profit structure that OpenAI had for a while. Now, I don't personally know a ton about PBCs, but you know, it definitely is telling that they, in their announcement, are basically are linking right out to the XAI announcement, clearly making this a case of, you know, competition. They've been vocal that, you know, when Elon Musk initially invested, they claim he wanted it to be for-profit. He claims he wanted it to be non-profit. So there's this huge controversy, I think, within AI around kind of the direction OpenAI is going with all this. All I can say really is that, you know, this company is bringing in billions. They're actually very profitable revenue-wise, but they spend so much more than they are making that they are not on track to continue scaling at this rate without considerable more profit or investment. And so, you know, I think this needs to be read in that context.
So
Do you think they're going to continue to have the challenges from other organizations in terms of them turning into a for-profit, or do you think that's going to start to cool down now?
Well, I honestly don't know enough about the legal sort of process surrounding this kind of issue. I can imagine that there might be some kind of legal dispute on behalf maybe of, you know, board members or people who have a large share in the company. That would be all I could really imagine. I don't think that I think that they'll certainly face public backlash and continue to be seen as kind of more evil and dystopian as time goes on, which I think is generally how people are perceiving them these days. But I think that, you know, it would have to be a pretty serious legal challenge from someone with serious stake in the company, I think, for it to really touch them on this level, because, you know, the reality is they didn't have to be a nonprofit, and this is a designation that a lot of AI companies are using, and so it makes competitive sense for them to do this, of course. Especially,
It's a big change in brand for them. I mean, from sort of the, you know, the darling of AI to now being, you know, a little bit vilified. So that's interesting.
it does remind me a bit of when, you know, the Google model, where "don't be evil" or "we're not evil," when that motto eventually changed and everyone kind of turned on Google a little bit. It reminds me a little bit of that time.
So Adam, are they going to still contribute innovations to the open source community, or is that now everything's proprietary?
I don't think anything of substance will be delivered to open source. Let me put it that way. Basically, not like unfortunately, what's kind of happened in AI is that, you know, if you ask one of these Chinese models, what are you? It will say, I'm GPT-4. And the reason that the Chinese AI says that is because it's trained on all the OpenAI data. And that wasn't even open source data. That was just them scraping the results from ChatGPT and using it to retrain the Chinese model. And so you can see that basically anything OpenAI releases is instantly cannibalized by competition as training data. And so I think they're going to play everything ridiculously close to the chest. I don't even think they will release their top models to the public anymore. What they'll do is they'll release basically distilled forms of them that they think are less vulnerable to this kind of IP theft, because I can, OpenAI, it's also kind of a classic tech play, I think, similar to Google. It's like, you release a bunch of open source stuff, you get a lot of developer buy-in, you get a lot of connections in the industry, and then you pivot completely to closed source. Google released Transformers, but now they don't open source anything for AI, So I mean, that's an exaggeration. They certainly open source stuff, but nothing that would be kind of a, profit risk to them.
Yeah, and just to build on that, Google realized that friends at AWS were basically taking everything that they open sourced and productizing it, and OpenAI is now realizing that too. And except for the Google Notebook thing, they've kept things close to the vest because IP theft is real. Let's move on to the quantum AI. So really the thing we're kind of talking about with quantum and AI is the rise of applications that leverage quantum technology. And one of the things is there's more discussion around quantum with the Willow chip from Google, and now NVIDIA partnering with them to try to accelerate that. I don't think NVIDIA really wants quantum because, Ken made a comment that Jensen said, oh yeah, it's 10 years off. But quantum applications is really the discussion, not quantum technology. And there aren't that many quantum applications. The one big one that's kind of been discussed is, can it forecast a future scenario? And I think when you look at, image exploitation like space exploration, quantum computers can look much further into data. Because, a lot of the image data that we see from like a telescope in space is actually data. It's not an image. It's processed into an image, but it's actually data. And a computer can process that much better than even, a human eye. So I think it's emerged, but again, it's going to, when you look at quantum AI and operating systems, they don't really have an operating system. That's really what we're kind of talking about here, is getting an operating system where you can actually build apps on top of it. It's not the kind of same technology footprint that we think about relative to our current stack of computing, which is, hexadecimal based. It's a kind of completely different paradigm. Now, the one thing I will say is, governments are using quantum computers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
They're using government computers, quantum, to break passwords.
That seems like the scenario that would be the most obvious. Do you remember when it was probably about 10, 15 years ago, people were doing all sorts of war games on scenarios in different situations? It seems like that's an application for a quantum computer.
Yeah. So the idea of a simulation where it's an advanced simulation. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think what starting to emerge in my mind here, what you're saying is what quantum is really good at, because it can break passwords, is looking at a million different possibilities incredibly fast, right? And so one of the things that it has in synergy with AI is, if you think about all these parameters that have to be looked at when an AI, takes action on a request, quantum would be really good at looking at lots of different neural network paths at the same time. So there could be an accelerant of the two coming together at some point in time.
Okay, so this headline, the last headline, is really AMD invests in cloud provider Volter. They did not buy them. So we're kind of saying they bought a big chunk. I think over 330 million of investment by both AMD and a VC firm. So Volter's been around 20 years. They provide basically cloud and AI based data centers. They do not mark it up like AWS, so they're really cheaper than Oracle, which is cheaper than AWS. So what's really kind of come out here is there's cheaper ways to run applications in a data center, in a cloud, than what people are paying for right now. And just given what we just talked about today relative to NVIDIA with a desktop, a computer that, they say is a desktop, it's probably more of a server, but it's not out yet. But the shift to LLM-based computing is here. AMD actually can run GPUs. I mean, as far as Volter, But it's been a long time coming. Vulture's been around, like I said, 20 years, and they finally have taken some investment. I would expect to see a lot more investment go into that firm because there's so much demand for compute power. But I think when you actually look at the idea of private cloud and now a country-based cloud computing, where basically you just want to keep your data in your country. I think the biggest thing that is going to be a revolution is the fact that people realize that maybe SaaS cloud, other than running your CRM maybe or your email, is really not what people thought it was going to be.
It's interesting, Jim, because I actually have a blog draft that I've had for a couple of weeks. I've been sort of thinking about, which is sort of the future of the database industry and the rest of that, given the advent of cloud. I think what's interesting is I wonder how some of the cloud providers that are really heavily relational database oriented and focused are actually going to have more weight and more of a drag on them than somebody like Vultr and others who don't have that basis. So I think this is interesting. This
mean if you want to sell millions and millions of your GPUs, you've got to have a captive data center. Is that what this is sort of mean?
No, it means data centers are changing.
Yeah.
And compute is changing. So look, I think the thing I would just tell you is that I have a GPU computer. It happens to have a CPU, but it's also a GPU computer. It's a MacBook Pro, and Adam has one too. And a lot of people that have Windows PCs, they're not GPU computers, and that's why Microsoft is pushing so hard to say you got to buy an AI PC.
Yeah.
Because even things like Teams don't run well on the older, Intel architectures on Windows machines. So I think that's the thing that's slowly kind of coming out, is that applications can be more efficient if they can tap into a GPU architecture, not just for graphics.
Yeah.
So that does have big implications for the database industry. There is a whole open source database project around GPUs, Betsy, you probably want to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're just beginning to understand what that really landscape looks like in the future.
Absolutely. So look, this has been our first Aragon Live. I want to thank everybody. Please stay on after we stop this, because we're going to continue our meeting. But for everybody that's listening to this, it's been Aragon Live. We do this every week. And I want to thank the team for jumping in here, first week back, and looking forward to a great 2025. This has been Aragon Live, and we are signing off.